So without further ado, Dr. Germany Tubas, I've known her for about 10 years. She doesn't even remember that we were reviewers for NSF, and then she went to USDA and then came back. So, Dr. Tubas.
Thank you, Nora. That was great. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to say that this is a really well-planned next step, because some of the things that Caroline and Anna said, I won't repeat, but I just want you to hold on to that fact. And what I want you to do, because there's a portion here that I want you to interact with each other and with me. If you're too far from each other, you might want to be closer to each other, look at your left and look at your right, and find a group of 3 or 4, because you're going to be talking to each other and thinking together in the latter part of this presentation. So I'd like you to do that now, so we can go straight to the next step, okay? And if you see this, probably in the future you'll see more of this design in front of you. NSF is trying to adopt a common presentation slide. You see our logo, you see the backdrop of all the things that we do within that area. I don't know if you can identify any of the directorates within that. So here's one thing that I also want you to carry with you. Don't think that because you're a small group that it won't make a difference. It does. In fact, the small groups are the ones, when they're so dedicated, that actually make a difference and make that change. Okay, so I want you to think about that when you're working on your proposals. Now, I want to know how many of you have submitted proposals to NSF. We have to increase that number, okay? And if you have submitted, you're probably known as principal investigators or co-principal investigators. And how many of you plan to submit a proposal? Okay, we need to increase that number again. Okay, but then you're called as potential PI if you plan to do that. And how many of you have received funding? Wonderful, but I need more hands up, okay? So you are our grantees and our PIs, and how many of you have thought of working at NSF? We need more, okay? Either as reviewers or as program officers, and there are those opportunities coming every so often, especially in different directorates and different discipline areas. So the National Science Foundation, as you may know, is really an independent agency. It does not fall under any kind of department. Unlike NIH, which is under the Department of Human Health and Services, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, NSF is a separate agency which was created by Congress in 1950 with the main mission to promote progress of science, advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense. All this is done through doing basic research. So, oh, my animation is not working. This is just to let you know, if you want to know NSF by the numbers, these are the numbers in FY 2017, where there's about $7.5 billion in terms of the budget. 95% of that is spent on research. Only 5% is for overhead. So you get all the money out. Only 5% is left so that we can manage the whole enterprise. And because of that, we get about 49,000 plus proposals just in FY 2017. And that translates to 11,500 awards and funding 1,800 institutions and organizations, supporting more than 350,000 researchers, okay, all in the field of science and engineering, as well as STEM education. So we are proud to say that since the very beginning up to now, there's about 214 plus Nobel laureate that was supported through NSF. So it's a big number considering that you have only so few Nobel laureates, okay? If you have seen the latest strategic plan of NSF, that's for 2018 to 2022, entitled Building the Future, Investing in the Discovery and Innovation. Publication is at the bottom. You can click on that one. Oh, by the way, I have asked Dr. Garza to share this presentation with you, so you don't have to take notes. And if you need to click on those links, they're clickable, okay? And what I want to show here is that one of the focus of this particular strategic plan is really building that diversity in the STEM workforce. And we say that this is the responsibility of everybody at NSF. But I just want to focus on education and human resources because many of those programs that focus on broadening participation are managed through EHR. So I'm going to call education and human resources now EHR. So you're going to begin hearing those alphabet soup. And here's how it's organized. Like any other directorate, EHR has 4 divisions, and it's led by the assistant director. Okay? Within this structure, there are 4 divisions. One is the Division of Research on Formal and Informal Settings, simply called as DRL for the very long name. And they're focused really on STEM education research. And then we have the Division of Graduate Education, DGE, with a focus really on graduate education. And the Division of Undergraduate Education, as the name implies, undergraduate education. What is most complicated is my favorite division, Division of Human Resource Development, because we cover everything from K to grade, but with a focus mostly on broadening participation and capacity building at minority-serving institutions. So I'm focusing only on these two divisions, undergraduate education and human resource development, because these are the 2 divisions that oversee the HSI program. Okay. And I'll give you some examples of the programs that they manage under the Division of Undergraduate Education. You have heard maybe both Stephanie and the ladies from Delta, okay, about SSTEM, which is your scholarship in STEM. You've also heard them talk about ATE, which is Advanced Technological Education. But what I want you to also look at here is I use EHR, because the HSI program is actually under the umbrella of IUSE, with the focus of improving undergraduate STEM education at Hispanic serving institutions, right? And lastly, we also have Robert Noyes Teacher Scholarship, which is focused on developing K-12 teachers. So, as I said, ATE is meant to develop the technicians of the next century. And I use EHR, focuses on improving undergraduate STEM education and STEM learning. And NOISE is focused on developing K-12 STEM teachers. And STEM is a scholarship program. Now, what do I want you to carry from here? Aside from the fact that I use is the umbrella for the HSI program, I want you to know that ATE has also a mentor net, that if you need some kind of support or help to help you build your ideas, you can call on them, and they will be supporting you in terms of trying to build that connection, the network, or opportunities to work with others. And as STEM, as you know, is a scholarship program. And you can use that in coordination with your HSI project. If you have your HSI project and you want to support students, you can use that and say, we can tag team and do that one. Okay? There are other programs that I can show you where you can use that kind of collaboration coordination. Now, this one is under the Human Resource Development, or HRD division. As you can see, we have these core programs. We call them core because these are the ones that are usually in the congressional language line item budget. So they're mostly congressionally mandated, and they've been there for quite a while. Some of them supporting institutions that are minority serving, and some of them supporting underrepresented minority students in different types of institutions. Okay, so it's a combination. And you could see that, like Advance, is focused on developing the career of women in the academy, faculty, okay? In the same thing that AGAP, which is an Alliances for Graduate Education, the professoriate, with the current focus of developing minority faculty, so you can have more diversity in the professoriate. Think about that when you're looking at your HSI program. If you're looking at faculty, look at how you can develop more minority faculty through an AGAP alliance. There is a Texas alliance for AGAP. Those who are coming from New Mexico, we would like to see New Mexico alliance. We don't have an alliance for New Mexico in AGAP. So you have CRESS, Centers of Research Excellence in Science and Technology, basically builds capacity building at minority serving institutions. And when we say minority serving institutions, they must have an enrollment of 50% or more underrepresented minorities. So it's a mix, not just one race or ethnicity. Then you have, of course, HBCU UP, focuses mainly for HBCUs. Again, it's an institution focus. Same thing as TCUP, tribal colleges and universities for tribal colleges, universities, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian serving institutions. LSUP focuses on students, underrepresented minority students, not necessarily from minority serving institutions, because we know that we do have a lot of underrepresented minority students from major institutions, and we want to be able to reach them too, okay? Okay, I don't have to go through that because I already described that, but we're going to HSI program. Although it's technically known as Improving Undergraduate STEM Education at Hispanic Serving Institutions, we simply dearly call it HSI program. So you can call it HSI program. And basically, it really focuses on undergraduate STEM education at HSIs. We're not saying that you just focus your attention on Hispanic students or Latinx students, but remember what makes you an HSI is the enrollment of your students in there. But we really want to see a more global focus on the institution that includes faculty, staff, and students. Okay. And you have the program solicitation, 18-524, and you may know by now that the deadline has passed, March 6th. There are two tracks. One is for the bigger conglomerate, and track 2 is for new to NSF. And we also have a resource hub with the real mission of trying to help all these different kinds of HSIs, whether to have them help them with writing a competitive grant, or get them network or support workshops for faculty development, anything that will help an HSI build their capacity. That's what it's supposed to be. Now, why are we showing this despite the fact that it has passed application deadline? You know that we have supported 7 more HSI conferences. So we continue to seek stakeholder input because we want to keep on improving or learning from you what else can we do for the HSI community. So the more that we get feedback from you, the better for you, right? So you have to send us that, whether you're attending the conference or not. As Anna said earlier, we do respond to emails, to calls, and we are open to everybody trying to come and visit us. So if you let us know, we'll set an appointment for whoever you need to see, okay? So NSF really has that open door policy for guests who would like to talk to anybody, including the director. She's very open to that, and she welcomes talking to those in the field. Okay. I know it didn't get the color. Here's what Anna has been talking and Carolyn has been talking earlier. You have an idea. Work on it. Don't wait. Don't be like Calvin. You know, when does he submit? What is that mood? When do you write? Panic time. You don't really want to do the panic time, especially because if you're new and you get your application only the last minute, you may have some problems submitting. So we really want you to start early, ask questions often, and start early. Okay. Now, who's on your left and who's on your right? Okay. You have a groups of 3 or 4, and I will get volunteers from you. When I ask you some of these things, I'll give you a few minutes to think about it, okay? First, think about your STEM education vision. Whether you're looking at it at your local context, your institutional context, or the global context. Go ahead. Discuss with your group. Okay. Who wants to give us their STEM education? Any volunteer? Yes.
I'm loud enough. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. And so I'm Kylie Brewer from Troy University. I'm the HSI STEM director there, as well as chemistry faculty. One of the things, we're a very small school of 1,400 students maximum, and we have what we would consider high touch. Class size is no more than 30 students. We're also the faculty are academic advisors. And so one of the things that we feel that we want to be advocates for is the high impact practices from AAC&U and utilizing those skills in the classroom as well as outside the classroom experiences. About that from our STEM education.
High impact tools.
High impact
Practices to be used in the classrooms.
That's correct. Course-based undergraduate research, internships, experiential learning, those kind of opportunities.
Okay, who wants to go next? Another idea. What's your STEM education vision?
So our vision is to increase the number of females and underrepresented groups that go into graduate studies and enter the professoriate. So we are looking at more high-impact practices at the undergraduate level involving women and underrepresented groups in undergraduate research and providing that path to go on and complete their degrees.
So best practices so you can get more women underrepresented groups to go into the academe. Okay. Now, while you have that thought, I want you to go look at what is it like today? What is the picture today? Discuss again, and then I will get some volunteers to tell me what they see is the picture, current picture. Anybody who wants to volunteer first? I want to know if it differs from your vision from what we have today.
I don't know if this hits on this, but they're researchers. So for Amauri Nora, it was whatever we do, it should be scalable and replicable and all this. And the way that I see it happening is that it isn't scalable, that it's not replicable. Why? Because like Agnes knew that working with students in the developmental thing didn't work, but LCC did it. And we found out it didn't work. But I didn't know and I didn't ask her. So there's a disconnect.
More communication.
Yeah.
And more interaction. Another group? Yes, ma'am.
From my experience, 19 years in K-12, as I was working on my dissertation and working on STEM initiatives, I would receive training that was NSF funded, and got to meet scientists and engineers. But then as an administrator, many superintendents would implement these things at the high school, not at the elementary or the middle school. Now that I'm in higher ed, for the first time, I'm trying to do these initiatives, and what I'm finding is there's silos, as my colleague so well put it, where we have, the scientists, the different colleges, working on maybe grants or STEM initiatives, but a disconnect, a lack of communication with K-12 leaders and that training that's needed so that those decisions help the whole community effort. So that's my take.
Thank you. And you'll find out that that is true even within the federal agency. We have a lot of common grantees, but we don't know what one college is doing with another, when in fact, if they just talk to each other, they can leverage that funding, and so they can use common activities and fund more people if they want, because they already have common activities. But since we don't talk to each other, and you don't talk to each other, we're missing opportunities there. So, it looks like we were answering this as we were thinking of what is the education looking like today by saying we need more interaction, we need to break down that silo, we need more best practices shared, and we need more underrepresented minorities, underrepresented groups, and women represented in the academe. So what we want to know is, what does NSF need to do to get this going? Anybody who wants to suggest now? We're open.
The common measures, and there was one more thing.
Well, I think that this is what NSF is doing, right? Looking at a collective impact where you can set up these alliances around common measures, common agenda, continuous communication. You know, how do we communicate with each other? And then how do we support that through reinforcing activities so that we are not all doing separate things. What we learned doing this nationally is that you really need to have a person involved. It's not just about putting things on portals, but having a person involved that's a connector. We're calling them regional connectors that bring together people across, not just within your institution, but across institutions to start sharing what they're doing and coming up ways to leverage, as you said, the work that they're doing.
So, more support for more systemic and collective changes. Okay, I'll bring that back. Let them know that that's what we're looking for. Yes, sir.
Maybe an opportunity for NSF to reach, once the applications come in, maybe NSF to reach back out to institutions, or how about this, once they're selected, right? Once the funding is selecting, or the institutions are selected for funding, maybe to coordinate institutions together, NSF to facilitate that coordination. As to, let's say, there are aspects where it is focused on underrepresented females in the professorate, or if it's a group of institutions that are focused in on high impact practices, something to that regard, where you could provide almost like compartmentalized workshops for those institutions. I think that would be helpful.
That would be good for PI meetings, and I think we have to tell them that during PI meetings, they should actually ask PIs what they want to discuss during their own PI meetings, not just NSF setting that agenda. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add one more thing, because I think that the resource hub was a good start, but NSF is only putting $3 million into that for one resource hub, and that's just not enough to meet the needs of everyone that's here. And so hopefully it's a good start, but I think that we really need to think about funding more of these and then connecting those.
We're talking about the HSI Resource Hub, and yes, we realize that it's a small amount for $3 million for, I think that's 5 years. But as we said, we continue to get feedback, and we're hoping that we could do more than just one, maybe regional, whatever it takes to get more of help. But we will need to get from our stakeholder the feedback that says this is not enough, we need more. And if we get that, we'll listen. As you know, that the program solicitation that was put out is really based on the listening sessions that we've held. So that's the very good reason that we keep on listening to you and getting feedback from you through these conferences.
Add one more. I would add to emphasize faculty development a lot more. What happens in the classroom is extremely important. So all these resource hubs and all this stuff that is going on outside of the classroom is important, but it's the faculty that play a critical role with these students to communicate what they're learning, but also to provide the support, the validation, the activities like high impact practices, and You know, how do they work with these low-income communities? A lot of faculty come to places like Laredo and they have no idea what this place is all about or how to work with these students. And so I think that sort of faculty development is critical.
And you know that's included in track 1. All those things that you want, faculty development, it's how you develop it, how you look at what is needed by your faculty, either as a group or in your institution or the different colleges that you have, as long as they're within the STEM discipline area. How you do that is really up to you. So we gave you that free hand to develop. If you're going to focus on faculty, you can focus on faculty. If you want to focus on faculty and students, you could do that. If you want to focus on faculty with partnerships, collaboration, you could do that. So track 1 includes that. It's really, although I would say it's really good to be more focused rather than all scattered, because that's going to be one of those things that, oh, the reviewer thought this is too ambitious. They can't do this in a period of 3 years, a period of 5 years. Okay, so you might want to start doing it step by step and figuring out what is your priority, why you think that should be the priority. If you think the pedagogical approaches have to be updated every so many years because of how fast science moves, that's really one of the things that you can say justify. We need more changes in pedagogy. Science moves at a fast pace and our faculty can't keep up with it, so we need annual faculty development in different areas.
I think part of the challenge too, I worked with several of Collective Impacts and with several funders as well, is working with communities or with campuses on a sustainability plan on the onset, like day 1. This is a 3-year grant. How are we sustaining this when year 3 comes? So I think that's really important because funding priorities change. So I think that's part of the challenge, is really coming up with a sustainability plan from the onset so that you're not in a bind in your year 3. It's like, oh, we're not getting refunded, so it goes away. Part of that is institutional commitment or community engagement that can keep this initiative or effort alive.
You're correct. The only thing that you can really hear about NSF that is really constant is change. Okay? So you'll never know how long the priority is going to be. And that is part of one of the things that we look at when we measure the need for the program, is go forward and say, do we need a change? Do we need to refocus? Do we need a different priority area? So thank you very much for that. What I want you to actually understand in what you just did is really develop ideas. Ideas that you can put towards writing your proposals. You have questions, you have asked a lot of things, but now I want you to really focus on what you're going to do if you're going to write that as a proposal. Okay? So I'm going to go back to what NSF looks at when you're submitting your proposal. There are only 2 merit review criteria: intellectual merit and broader impact. And I want to know if that is clear for you, because when you're talking about intellectual merit, what you're simply saying is this proposal going to advance knowledge in this particular area, in this field? Okay? That is the basis for your intellectual merit. What about your broader impact? What is the potential to benefit society? So your societal impact is what you're looking for when it comes to broader impact. And then, while you're building that, you want to know if it's great. The reviewers would like to know if it's creative, original, or potentially transformative. That's intellectual merit. Oops, oh no, it's also in broader impact, right? Or well-reasoned, well-organized, sound, rational, mechanisms to assess success. Same thing in broader impact, right? And as you can see, qualified individual. Do you have a qualified individual? If not, you should have a team. If one person is not sufficient to carry out an intellectual merit proposal, you have to have a team. And it's the same thing. If your PI is really good in one aspect, but not on the other implementation aspect of your broader impact, you really have to have a team for that. So if your research is really not on social science, but you have a broader impact that requires a social scientist, don't forget to add that into your team. And do you have adequate resources to do both? Okay? So what I'm trying to say here is that the only difference between the two is what you're focusing on, but how to get to that is the same. Okay? But what is really important for you is to balance that. Okay? When we review that, we want to see that you're addressing both, not just one or the other. So you need to make sure that that's a balanced component. Because if you can see, in most of those STEM discipline research, the focus is really on intellectual merit. Why can't there be an equal focus on broader impact? Okay? And when you see that, scientific merit, oh, very good research, innovative, it's really one of this that has never been done. It will build on, or it will give you new knowledge, new theories, etc. And when you look at the broader impact, just supporting underrepresented students or minority students, is that it? Is that all that it can do? That's not balanced. That's not good, huh? Then, when you're looking at STEM education proposals, it's the other way around. There's so much on the broader impact that reviewers are finding, what's the new knowledge being contributed here? What is being advanced? What's the model? What's the theory? Where's the design? I didn't see it, okay? Because we're so heavy on providing information on the capacity that is being built, on institutional transformation, on retention or completion in STEM degrees. We forget that we have to add that evidence-based knowledge that is being asked to do that particular project. So here's what you really want to have: a real balance between the two, because when reviewers look at that, they don't rate you higher on your intellectual merit or higher on your broader impact. They rate those two things equally, okay? Oh, okay. These are just examples. You don't have to go through this. I can give you the slide, but there is a website that you can actually use and see examples to say, what's a broader impact? What are the things I can use for that? And these are, if you're looking at science or STEM discipline area, this is another website that you can use just to look for examples. So how do we make funding decisions? Okay? So you have submitted your proposals. Anna said you have done a very good job with that mock review. It's been submitted. How do we know if it's going to get funded by NSF? First of all, you have your peer evaluation, and they're going to give you a rating. Okay? And then there's going to be a panel review discussion, and they will recommend whether it's highly competitive, competitive, or non-competitive. And they will put that forward for the program officer, and then the program officer will evaluate that and move it forward for us to either say, yes, we concur, or no, we don't, okay? And then finally, they have to give a reason if it's a high decline, why it's being declined, and there's really no reasoning if it's a low decline, okay? So you have to ask them, if you have a high decline, why was it declined? I don't understand the reasoning behind the decline. It's okay to ask that. Okay, going back to, is it time for you to serve at NSF? Looking for proposal reviewers and looking for rotators, program officers, or sometimes known as program director. And there are different ways for your programs to be supported, your projects to be supported. They're all reviewed, whether they're full peer review or internally reviewed. So solicitations, dear colleague letters, fellowships, and major equipment program go through a full review. But for internal reviews, like workshops, conferences, by the way, conferences and workshops are supported by almost all programs. You'll just have to read what they're doing and what they can be funding in terms of those things. So don't limit yourself to just HSI program, because there are other programs that you may submit if you're proposing for conferences. Supplements. Then you have eagers, rapids. So eagers are for early, it's early concepts. Those that won't fit your regular solicitation. Rapids are for special occasions that require a quick action in response to calamity, for example, disasters, hurricanes, for example. And RAISE is another one, which is research for advancement of interdisciplinary science and engineering. Okay, so it has to be more than just one discipline if you're going to propose something under RAISE. Okay, so this is really just a diagram of how your proposal goes through the process. You have 90 days to write, at least 90 days to write your proposal once the solicitation is out in the streets. So once it's out, count 90 days, but you don't really want to wait for the last day. Okay, don't wait for the 90th day. If you can submit it earlier, so much better. But sometimes it's really good to ask your program officer whether your ideas would fit into that program. Okay, always ask. And then once it's been received, it goes through proposal review. Okay, it could be reviewed ad hoc, meaning there's no panel, or it could be reviewed by a panel. And then once it's reviewed, whatever comes out, it's going to be recommended either for funding or declination. And we wait for the Division for Grants and Agreements to finally say, yes, you have the money. Okay. Now, for new to NSF, if you're new, there's an extra process that you have to go through. So you have to really go and ask the Division of Grants and Agreements what you need to do if you are new to NSF. So we have within 6 months should be able to process everything. If you don't receive any information after 6 months that you have submitted your proposal, please don't wait. Ask your program officer why you're not hearing from them, okay? Any questions before I go to the last 10 minutes? Okay, I know we had a good interactive portion of that one. What I just want to focus on this time is really the funding priority for FY 2019. So you have heard of the NSF 10 big ideas. 4 of them are under process ideas, and 6 are under research ideas. And you can, again, look at all this information, more details on that website. One of the process ideas NSF includes, and I think Dr. Gates already discussed this earlier, and basically, again, with the long acronym, I'm not going to read that, is basically to make sure that everyone and everybody is involved in the STEM enterprise. And what I want you to really look closely is how can you get your own project connected with the NSF includes community. Okay, so we're trying to figure out other programs that can feed into the NSF includes projects. Then you have harnessing the data revolution, and many of you keep generating data and more data and more data. What are we going to do with that? And NSF recognizes that there's so much more of that we really need to have a mechanism to determine how we're going to incorporate, analyze, use, store all this information. And this program actually is across the whole NSF, so NSF-wide. So you can look at different kinds of things that you can include if you're interested in putting in a proposal within these 10 big ideas. Now, the future of work at the human technology frontier. This is really important because more and more we are impacted by the use of new technologies. Our daily lives are impacted with new technologies. So if you look at this, okay, there are 4 research themes: building the human technology partnership, augmenting human performance, illuminating the socio-technological landscape, and fostering lifelong learning. All 4 of them can actually fall under EHR. So if you have a project where you want to do this and look at what they're asking for in this big idea, you might want to consider what you have. Now, why am I focusing on this? In addition to what they're going to get in FY19, they're also going to have what they call as accelerator funds. They want to accelerate that, add more money into that. So if you want money, this is where the money is. Big money coming into these programs. And of course, there's also that growing convergence in research, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, everybody trying to be together and find something in common. You will see more and more of this, and this is one other thing. This is a process idea and not a research idea. So when you say process idea, just like includes, you really are looking for implementation and design rather than carrying out a research in those areas. Okay, so think about what kind of processes, what kind of implementation activities that you could do to fit into these implementation ideas. So these are the 10 big ideas. The ones in yellow are process ideas, and the ones in white are research ideas. Okay, so if you look at that and you're wondering where you can put anything, you have at least 10 different ways where you can put your proposal. But most of all, when you're doing that, have fun.
Right now, we're going to have Dr. Selena Mireles from the University of Texas Permian Basin, who's going to be speaking about the status of Hispanics in STEM education. For those of you that do not know Selena, for me, she's like a math guru, and she does all the calculus and teaches students that they can do math and that they can do math well and that they can become great math teachers. So without further ado, Selena, not Selena the singer, Selena the mathematician.
It's funny because I have another friend from Laredo, so I was fortunate to actually have a 2-year stint here in Laredo. I was at TAMU. I was excuse me, the Associate Dean of the College of Education. And then I most recently am finishing up my first year at UTPB, so I became a West Texas gal. I turned in my sombrero for my boots, something like that. So I did bring 3 other individuals with me from UTPB, and let me introduce them to you. Dr. Yolanda Salgado, she's over here. She's the chair of, now I know why, because of the little stairs. The chair of Curriculum and Instruction in the College of Education, and she's also a bilingual education professor. Dr. Lillian Porter, she's over here. She's has her doctorate in educational leadership. She directs the Early College High School dual credit program for the university. And then to my left over here is Lorraine Spickerman. She's the Jackie of all trades. She currently directs we initiated a new center this year. It's the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And she directs that, and she teaches anything we ask her to teach, developmental education even this past, developmental math this past semester. And does a lot of our outreach initiatives, including AVID and Sanford Inspire, Sanford Harmony. So we're very fortunate to have her. There's a 4th person that's listed on this slide, and that's Shannon Davidson. She is you'll see in the very last slide. She's not with us today because she's wearing one of her hats. She currently is the curriculum director for the STEM Academy, which is a charter school that we have at UTPB. And it goes from K through 9th grade. Next year it'll add 10th grade. And thanks to Dr. Woodley, our wonderful president, I'm interim superintendent of the charter school. And that's been fun. So there are 4 parts to this presentation, and I saw on the agenda that I have 30 minutes. I probably should set my timer. But I want to quickly add a 5th component, and I want to follow the lead of Dr. Gates because she shared a little bit of her narrative. And I really think that that's important in the context of everything. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and my journey. I was born and raised in Brownsville, Texas. And by the way, I'm a crier, so there might be a tear or two that comes. I was born and raised in Brownsville, Texas, and I loved it. But as soon as I graduated from high school, I was ready to leave. And I thought everything was great. I had my dad, may he rest in peace, one tear already coming out. I never felt the machismo of anything. I loved math. I've always loved math, and I was always damn good at it. And he never led me to believe that that wasn't a thing that women do. He always was very supportive of everything about that, and I just didn't know any better until I went to UT. I did my undergraduate at UT Austin, and before that, I had a counselor in high school who told me, be careful, because you're a big fish in a little pond right now at Pace High School in Brownsville. When you go to UT, you're going to be a little fish in a big pond, and you'll be lucky if you ever get a C. And I'm happy to report to you that I graduated with a 4.0 in mathematics, and later, after I finished my PhD, I went back and told her, don't be telling people that. So I think it's very important, that we hear each other's stories, and the journey continues. I want to tell you, my friends. I face adversity on a regular basis. I shared with them a story that I had in Big Spring about a month ago. We face it in the workplace, unfortunately. I've had individuals who have shared with me and told me, oh, I love the way you write. I know you can get this grant. Can you write it? And then I put my name on it? No, mijito. That's not how it works. And I say this with a quick segue. I have plenty of stories. We'll probably be at the bar tonight. I'll share more of them with you. But I share this with you because we have, beautiful stars in this audience. But I especially want to tell you one of the brightest stars in my life has been Dr. Nora Garza. So I just want to tell you, I'm so grateful that we're here, and we're here a lot of the things she's done. When I took my friends through a tour, I told them, Dr. Garza helped to build that, and it was her work that did that, and I'm so grateful to be a part of your life and the things I've learned from you. So thank you for that. All right, so that was number 1. Okay, so here we start the official slide. So one of the things I shared with one of my other friends, I don't think she's here yet, but is I learned, how did I learn how to write? Well, from a math person, it was hard because I like to put things in variables. I said, I'll say yes, no, X, Y, Z, and the correlation, and that's the end of it. So I thought it was going to be a real interesting challenge to actually write full sentences that weren't proofs to theorems. But I found my niche through grant writing because of the technical writing. And I had a wonderful mentor, Dr. Barbara Lyman. I had a master's class where we talked about writing grants. And one of the things she did, one of our final assignments, was writing a U.S. Department of Education FIPSI grant. Anybody remember FIPSI? And so that was our final, one of our summative projects. And so I did that, and that wasn't too bad. It was the technical writing. Fast forward a few years later, and I was an assistant professor, 1998, in the math department. And I said, hey, I'm going to write a grant. And everyone, yeah, okay. And lo and behold, brand spanking new, didn't know any better, wrote my first FIPSI grant, and it was funded. And I remember getting the call from the program officer, and I said, well, do I need to add anybody? I am a junior faculty. This is my first year as a professor. Do I need to do anything? And he told me, was it your idea? I said, yes, sir. He said, then you do it. And the rest is history. So through that time, I have found that there's some patterns. That's what I do for a living as a mathematician, is recognize patterns. So I found some patterns, and I built my portfolio through different grant projects. But the main incentive, which we heard earlier today from Dr. Rendon, another great role model for us, is that I always have the students at the forefront of my heart. Right before I submit the proposal, I say a Hail Mary, and I say, if God, this is what you want for these kids, let it be. And that's what motivates me. And I think that having that strong motivation is really, really critical. So as I've matured in my career and have different bumps and bruises, I found it my obligation to build capacity with my colleagues. And we laugh about this because they'll say, well, how do you learn how to do this? And we have a grant writing team, and what does this mean? What does broader impact mean? What does this mean? And I said, well, this is lesson number 7. Come on, let's go. And I've just been finding these patterns and trying to share these patterns. So this was one of the motivations for this particular presentation today, is just sort of give you an overview of some of the things we've learned and that would influence your narrative as you move forward. So here we go. Okay, so we put some activities. I know I only have 30 minutes, so we might skim through some of these activities, but one of the things I'd like you to do is just in 30 seconds, what is the actual definition of STEM? And maybe we'll just ask you, anybody? Science, technology, engineering, and math, right? That's what the acronym means. How many of you remember the day when it was SMET? Do you remember that? And thank God they changed it. Okay, next. So, let's keep going. So what I think is really interesting is that one of the Department of Homeland Security actually has identified 222 fields that are considered STEM fields. And you'll be surprised to learn what some of those things are. They're not always in biology, in chemistry. They could be in agriculture. They could be in some of these other places. And that's a good slide or a good link to go look to see if you're really wanting to do something innovative, you want to look to some of these other innovative fields. Okay. So again, I'm just going to point out some quick highlights from each of our slides so you can, some startling innovative facts to draw upon for your need. Well, it's a little bit small print, but you might notice there that the biomedical engineers, that is the largest one. But so it's good to increase that, but you might want to look at that mathematics there. In fact, we talk about science fairs. What about a math fair? Or why can't math be in a science fair? You like that, right? Yeah, me too. Okay. A little bit, some Texas knowledge, because most of us are from Texas or are writing from a Texas perspective. Regarding the Texas essential knowledge and skills, and somebody brought that up, and that's the perspective I like to take too. The whole continuum, the pre-K through 20 continuum. You have to see the big picture. So if you look at the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, and this one is the science, real interesting fact. Students are not tested in science until 5th grade. And students never get chemistry until high school. So there's a big preparation deficit that we're dealing with. Next slide. Technology, just coming up the ranks. And I, pale in comparison to my colleague here, Dr. Gates, but one of the things I can tell you is that a lot of times the technology field has landed in the career and technical education, not necessarily in a content-specific discipline. Next slide. Engineering, sort of the same thing. Thank God for robotics. Robotics has really made a big change in how we think about engineering. It has made it practical, it has made it relevant and significant to lower level elementary school students. So I'm really happy to see that's coming along more and more. But that's, again, some of these niches. And math, woohoo! Hands in the air, that's great. The mathematics, even though, and you'll see this in another slide, the college and career readiness standards really started to look at the spectrum of what mathematics entails, we still really see an underplay and a lot of still reaction to what happened to us in the 70s. Anybody went to school in the 70s, you don't have to raise your hand. But you may have been victim to the whole Sputnik reaction. And what they did was they said, well, something's going wrong. We're not first in space. We're not first in space. We got to do something. So what they did is they went and they asked higher education institutions, they asked mathematicians, what do we need to do to better prepare math students, to get math ready? And they said, well, of course, they need set theory, they need abstract analysis, they need these other theoretical mathematics. Don't get me wrong, big fan. But what unfortunately they did is they took that idea and they took it down to the elementary schools. And that's why you have that new math, and the new math didn't go well at all. And so we have a generation of students who have a significant gap and, quite frankly, hatred, because they didn't ever get a fundamental understanding. It jumped right to this theoretical piece. So fortunately, with the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, we've seen a shift in the math standards, and we see more of the multiple representations, but we're still not quite getting it right. And I would say the biggest challenge with the math TEKS is not so much what the standards say, but it's the pedagogy, how it's being taught. There's still, even though the standards from NCTM have been out since the 80s, and then a revised version in 2000, I think it's still a very viable thing to study and to include in your proposals. It's just that fundamental. Okay, and I mentioned to you the career and technical education, and I heard that a few times throughout the day. And the situated learning that Dr. Gates mentioned, I'm a big fan of that. And I think that this is one of the other things, marrying the theoretical classes to the application and the manifestations of those theoretical classes through situated learning and through career and technical education is absolutely a fabulous thing to do. And I think some people are starting to do that, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And we can see it in different facets. And when we say science, we're not just talking about this global science. We're talking about biology. We're talking about chemistry. We're talking about organic chemistry versus inorganic chemistry. I mean, there's so many facets, so there's a lot of work to go around. And I wish NSF would fund more of us as we diversify in these things. Hint, hints. Okay, I already mentioned the college and career readiness standards. I just want to mention really quickly that we see a broad spectrum of mathematics. We see a broad spectrum of science. We see these process standards versus the content standards, the idea of logical, what people like to call soft skills, which there's nothing soft about them. They're very hardcore. The idea of critical thinking, problem solving, and things of that nature. And I think that's a challenge as we write proposals to include in our narrative how we can make concrete contributions to the increase of these skills. And I say skills, again, not in the loose sense, but how can we make what we're doing very practical to enhance that? I think the coordinating board is trying to do some things with the 60 by 30 and the marketable skills, but we need to make that more concrete. Just being able to say, well, we want people to be able to collaborate. It's not good enough yet. So again, I would encourage you to include that in your narratives to strengthen that innovation piece. This is interesting. And I just had a friend of mine who got some feedback from NSF DRK-12 grant. And one of the things that they mentioned was, well, yeah, you're in Texas, and you can close your ears. Yeah, you're in... in the reviewer comments, she noted that it said, yeah, you're in Texas, but you have your own college and career readiness standards. You need to think about the Common Core, which is viable. It's good. You want to include all of that. But you don't want to go this wide and an inch deep. It's good. I think we can make a case for thinking deeply about a couple of things and making linkages, but I don't think we need to completely say, okay, we're going to do everything Common Core. Here's one reason why. There's no science in the Common Core. It's very fundamental. It's reading, writing, arithmetic. So how do we pay homage to the Common Core when in an NSF proposal, when we're talking about the National Science Foundation, the gold standard for science proposals? We need to learn how to finesse that a little better. Okay, so each of these other slides is just a little bit of more information about what different standards, and one of the slides at the end, which we'll share with Dr. Garza to disseminate, are some really good resources. And again, I'm just going to pick out some things, and then Lorraine chime in, because I know she's been fundamental in a lot of the... You need to have a nerd in the background who can do a lot of the other research. We got a fan. Yay to the nerds. And they're all, I have a whole pocket of nerds, so I'm just really excited about that. But, some really interesting things that are coming from the standards, because we have to, again, nod to them in all the proposals that we do. So I already mentioned to you the lack of chemistry in the TEKS, and you'll see some of those kinds of things still in the national standards when it comes to science. Is there anything else on that? Oh, yeah, this is Lorraine's favorite slide. I thought it was really interesting because they put a facet of international. They actually have a Spanish version of their diagram for the technology. And I think Dr. Gates did a fabulous job earlier today to talk about the technology pieces of the standards. Anything on that? And then this one is, which one is this one? This is the engineering. Okay, so one of the other things I wanted to mention is this overlap between technology and engineering. In fact, one of the exercises Lorraine and I did early on is we looked at the list of all the courses in Texas, the high school list for Kate and the list for in the TEKS. And it's really, some of those are cross-listed. The technology are in the engineering, and the engineering are in the technology, which to me says we're talking about a little bit of an identity crisis or identity dissonance that we're going through, that those are still things that we can clearly identify. Again, another niche as we move forward. And then the mathematics, well, they're perfect. Just kidding. But I think that with the mathematics standards, we see really I included the AMATIC standards, the American Math Association for two-year colleges in there, because we see that we're really not forecasting well enough in the NCTM standards, and I think we need to allow for that. Might be time for an updated revision. So what do I mean by that? Although people may want to believe that math is stale and stagnant, and you can believe that if you want, but I'll come and talk to you later. I think that we're finding a lot of innovations in mathematics, and I'll give you an example, and you just pretend that you really enjoy it after I'm done. There's a really cute function. It's called the step function. Some people call it the ceiling function, some floor function. It's called a lot of different things. And it was in theory for a long time, for many decades. It was one of those functions that just sort of, poor thing, got put aside. But now, in our digital age and technology, that step function is looking pretty phenomenal. because it models a lot of things that we see with coding. Dr. Gates, am I right? So now, poor little step function out on the side is like becoming a star. And we don't see that in the standards, but we see it a little bit more. You'll see discrete mathematics in there, combinatorics, things that are fitting the technological wave a lot better. So again, so here's one of the, continuing on to the national landscape, this is still part one of the thing, is just some really interesting facts. Again, I'm just going to point out a few things. Hispanics in STEM jobs workforce, 9.6% in social and related sciences. But if you look at the lowest one, the 5.9% work in physical and related sciences. That's very, very low. Very, very low. 2014, Hispanic men obtaining degrees in the STEM field, highest in the biological sciences. Now, how many of you are actual content background in math, engineering, technology, or science? Raise your hand. Okay. So you know there's a hierarchy, right? Those of you who raised your hand know. The life sciences are considered a little bit lower, if you will, more accessible, if you will, versus like physics. And then, of course, you know who's at the very, very top. Thank you. See, I love Dr. Garza. She knows all the answers. So, again, you see that same representation here. Highest in biological sciences makes sense, but we still see this difference. Engineering, 9.78, physical sciences, and then math, the lowest. Again, relative to its position in this hard science versus soft science. Hispanic women, horrible, 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 horrible. 2.08% in engineering, 3.51% in math and science, physical science, 5.94% in biological sciences. So in this case, we actually see the lowest in engineering. Lots of work to be done, folks. Lots and lots. Okay. 21% of black young adults and 16% of Latino young adults have bachelor's degree. 43% white young adults have a bachelor's degree. So we're talking about STEM fields. This is even just college access. It's sad. Okay, from the NAEP data, statistically significant difference in reading. So what we're doing here, by the way, is we're just sort of looking down and down and down. Like, what is going on here and what's the state of affairs? So reading has something to do with this. Significant difference in reading between white students and their black and Hispanic 4th and 8th grade counterparts. 2015, we're lower for white, black, and Hispanic 8th grade students, as well as for male and female 8th graders. And that's the comparison. So something's changing, and it's not necessarily changing any better. I don't like this one at all. I'm sorry, I know it sounds like I'm a Debbie Downer and saying a lot of, but these are the facts. These are the facts. Great, great concern. International assessment. White U.S. 8th graders were surpassed only by scores of 3 other countries. Singapore, Chinese, I can't say that, Taipei, and Korea. It's a profound fact. Okay, more on the national landscape. In the state of Texas alone, we see trends for enrollment. Hispanics represent the largest percentage. This isn't new. Demographers have seen this coming. The census has seen this coming. This is not a surprise. Largest percentage of K through 12 students in total enrollment at 52.4%, officially the majority minority. 18.9% of K through 12 Texas students recognized as English language learners. 18.8%
receive some type of service at school. And the good news there is that those numbers are somewhat comparable, so that's hopefully there really is a one-to-one ratio with who's being identified and who's getting service, right? Among the bilingual population, over 80% are identified as economically disadvantaged, bringing a whole other set of problems. In the state of Texas, 93% graduate from high school. You're Caucasian. 84% for Hispanics. And the graduation trends are even more alarming in the United States overall, not just Texas, 73%. Okay, so something for you to take back with you is this reflection as you think about, because I think what's a good challenge, and it's an appropriate challenge, it actually should probably be, and I hope nobody really quotes me on this, but probably should be a nice SACS, a SACS COC type of folded into assessment, is really doing some of this analysis. But don't blame me if it ends up happening, because it really didn't come from me. I'm just saying, okay? I don't want to be blamed with anything to add to assessment for SACS. But, you know, really, you got to make the case, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you got to make the case for a strong need, a national need, a state need, and why you? Why is your institution in the best position to contribute to the research knowledge in this innovative way? So you have to really make a point, not just the, having the capacity for faculty, having the capacity for the work and the resources, but also having the need, the students and the community. So I think it's a really nice exercise to take back with you. Okay, this is another part, the need for STEM. So this is just giving you some more of that data. 40% of K-12 students in the U.S. Study indicates that minorities in STEM now account for almost 40% of the K-12 students in the U.S., and they can only earn 17% of it. So there's something's happening in their transit, right? Not flowing over. NSF in 2015, Hispanic men held 4.2% of the positions in the fields. This is sort of like what you've seen in the other slide. Let's keep going. Only 35% of STEM majors are retained by the conclusion of the first 2 years of college. So, retention. Let's see if there's anything else on there, at least give you some time to read. The occupations are growing. The need for STEM is growing. STEM occupations will grow 1.7 times faster than non-STEM occupations. And I think this other one is good too. 779,000 jobs between 2008 and 2018, so we're on the tail end of that, require a graduate degree in a STEM field. This is what their projection was. But the current data show that 555,000 native-born Americans will earn STEM graduate degrees, so there'll be a deficit, big gap. Okay. Another activity for you to take home, looking at your university, looking at your stakeholders, and trying to discern your innovations and your needs and those fits. Did you want to say anything else on that? Oh, okay. Why the need? Why do we have to have, well, of course, you saw a lot of these gaps, so we have to fill those gaps. I really like a lot of the linkages, like what we heard this morning from Dr. Rendon about the ganas, and here you'll see some, this reference to the idea of the choque. I don't know if it's on this one or on the other one. But, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily going right. And the climate isn't fitting. It's beyond the idea. David Conley, for example, talks about the idea of college readiness. But he doesn't necessarily address the specifics of the populations, especially the specific needs of Hispanic students. And there's a lot of things, the cultura, these kinds of things that need to be factored in, and they're very academic settings, unfortunately, are very sterile. They're not including a lot of those things. And we need to. Again, another way you can innovate is really adding and addressing the climate of the universities and of the classes. And you'll notice another theme here about men versus women and the disproportionate representation of women in male-dominated processes, politics, and programs. So underrepresented minorities, recruitment, this feeling of isolation, these affective things that you can't necessarily quantify, but we need to measure. So, and believe it or not, I'm going to say this, as a mathematician, we need to look at qualitative data too. We need to get narrative, just like we need to hear people's stories. And we need to learn from those stories and how, like the work that Dr. Rendon has done. You want to do this one?
You'll need a piece of paper. So in your spiral, there's 3 pieces, or a piece in the back. If you'll divide it into 4 quadrants, and just write HSI, or your institution's name, in the middle. In the top left quadrant, we talked about the definition of STEM. So if you want to fill that one in right now, you can, or we can come back to it. Top right is the characteristics of STEM. And you remember from Dr. Malice earlier, the slide talked about the main topics, but there are some subtopics of STEM that we don't necessarily think about. And those are the ones you want to really bring out, especially, well, we haven't done the Venn diagram, but especially if your stakeholders have those things in the community. So where we are at the Permian Basin, it's oil. So we need technology, we need STEM with the oil lens for us. If you're on a coast, yours might be the ocean. So what characteristics of STEM fit yours? In the bottom left quadrant, if you'll write an example of what it would look like where you are, in the bottom right corner is the non-example. What doesn't it look like, or what shouldn't it look like? This Frere model will fit with your Venn diagram when you build it. It'll fit with your quick write. You put those pieces together. It fits with your 3-2-1. All those pieces should go together to help you write the grant of your dreams.
Perfect. Okay, just a couple more slides and we're wrapping up. We've identified through some of our work 4 issues. I'll just tell you what those 4 issues are. Issue number 1 is the idea of STEM majors not making that a viable choice because they're not prepared. So lack of preparation. Number 2 is the lack of college knowledge. I mean, what's a GPA? What's financial aid? The underrepresented, the first generation. Number 3 is that math tends to be a roadblock. It really is a gatekeeper. Tons of research to show you that. And then number 4 is the idea of linking to practice, the conceptual understanding to an actual practice. And, oh yeah, that's still saying the same thing. And this is a list of resources, like I said, we'll share with Dr. Garza. And we'll be around for questions if you want to ask us. And then we just wanted to tell you a little bit about ourselves and our team. We meet every week for 2 hours. We have a list of all the different grants. every single thing that we find out about, that we get to know about, we pull it out and we say, what can we do something with this? And believe it or not, we look for the whole university. We found one that a new faculty member who's a math person would be a good fit. It fits his research agenda, so we passed it on to him, and we're working informally as a mentoring group. So Dr. Porter helped make sure he wrote down all the important things and how to write an objective, things that us as education folks do naturally. You know, we write student learning outcomes and things like that, but content experts may not necessarily have the tools for that, so we're helping them. And we just sort of started doing this, and it's been working. We're really just trying to help the university and of course, help the students. That's our number one priority. Thank you for your time.